28th of May 2020, I have in front of me two $5 bills. They look very similar. However, they're very much different. The one on the bottom, from 1963, was issued by the US Treasury Department and it says United States Note. The one on the top, more recently issued by the Federal Reserve, which is a privately owned central bank, which has a monopoly given to it to issue credits and currency for the United States of America. Initially, the founders, their money system was gold and silver. It had intrinsic value, that is, it had value in of itself. To make it convenient, a bank would have gold on deposit and they would then issue a note, which is basically a receipt for the amount of gold they had, and that was tradable for convenience. Each bank could issue their own notes. So you would have notes from banks in Boston, New York, Charlestown, wherever. These varied in value because the distance being large, there was an element of uncertainty as to the safety of the bank and to what might have happened that you would not be aware of. But basically, each note was worth its value in silver or gold. Now, some people wanted to change this and they want to bring in a central bank. A central bank is simply a bank that has been given the authority to issue credit or currency for the country involved. The first central bank dates way back to 1694, when the King of England at the time, King William of Orange, he had a problem, and his problem was how to pay for his wars and general costs. A group of bankers with collateral approached him and solved his problem very simply by saying if he gave them a monopoly on the issuance of money, they in turn would loan him as much money as he needed in perpetual bonds, and in that way he was able to finance his activities. And that was the creation in 1694 of the Bank of England. Now, this process gave England or Britain a tremendous advantage in world affairs. They were able to mount military campaigns and finance them by just issuing by the Bank of England credits or money, whereas their opposing enemies, the French and others, would have to pay for their campaigns with solid gold and silver, which was in short supply. And that is why England, even though it had a much lesser population than France, was able to rise to dominance in the world stage. Now, getting back to the Americas, the United States has three central banks in its existence. The first one was set up by Alexander Hamilton. It had a charter or a license for 20 years, which was not renewed, and it expired. The second central bank also had a charter, and when its 20-year term was coming to an end, the president at the time, Andrew Jackson, did not like the concept and looked upon central banking as un-American, and he vowed not to renew their charter. And his famous quotation was, "Either I will kill the bank or the bank will kill me." He did survive an assassination attempt. Some people say it was the bankers that carried out this attack. We don't know for sure. But he did not renew the central bank's charter, and that was the end of the second central bank. Now, the third central bank is what today we call the US Federal Reserve. Passed in the House of Representatives Christmas Eve 1913 and signed into law by President Woodrow Wilson, who later in life concluded that he had destroyed the country by bringing this central bank into existence. Now, the central bank is able to issue credit, and it does so. It is a fantastic advantage to be able to issue credit. The credit it issues is known as its asset base. Up till 2008, the size of this asset base was about $700 billion. Then we had the crisis, and the Federal Reserve issued more credit, that is, printed money, to about $4 trillion worth, and expanded the asset base to $4.5 trillion. They are able to create money out of totally thin air, but use that money to purchase real assets, usually treasury bonds or something similar, thereby putting an artificial price floor underneath the bonds that otherwise would drop in value due to the fact that there's nobody buying them. The value of a bond is inversely related to its interest rate. So if the bond value is kept high, the interest rate can be kept low. And that is why the United States has artificially low interest rates. Now, it is an absolutely fantastic advantage to the person that owns the bonds to have this buyer in the wings maintaining his price. Should he buy bonds of an inferior quality, they will come in and boost the price to great profit to him. Now, that is one way that money is brought into existence, simply by the Federal Reserve printing it out of thin air. Now, the other way money is brought into existence is regular banks issuing credits. When you go in and get a mortgage for a house, the bank will simply write up a mortgage. It is a credit for, we'll say, $500,000. And because the other banks in the system, that is the Federal Reserve System, will accept that premise, that will give that mortgage actual value of $500,000. Now, to do this, they will use what's known as the fractional reserve system, whereby usually it's about 10%, which means if they've got $100,000 in the deposit box, they can actually lend out a brand new $900,000 credit on the value of the $100,000, a multiplying effect of 10 to 1. And that is how currency increases from those two separate processes. Now, as the currency increases, of course, and you issue more currency into the system, the value of the existing currency must, by definition, fall. That is what leads eventually to inflation. It is a theft from older people who saved money when it had greater value, hoping to retire and live on it, and now they're left in destitution, paying property taxes of $10,000, $15,000. It is absolutely scandalous. Money must be something that holds its value. Otherwise, you're stealing from one group of people and giving it to another set of people. It is actually a taxation without representation, in a sense. So that is why I'm looking at these two bills. Now, the one on the bottom, both of them have a picture of Abraham Lincoln upon it. But the one on the bottom, as I said, is issued by the Treasury Department. The advantage of that is the Treasury Department could simply print out these money notes and put them into circulation and not owe any interest on them whatsoever. Contrast that to what the Federal Reserve does. The Federal Reserve will print out money. They will use that new credit to purchase US Treasury bonds, which then is an asset that they have on their balance sheet. But those bonds carry an interest rate. And from that point on, those bonds must have interest paid upon them. So that is a disadvantage to the United States, to be paying interest to the Federal Reserve on their system, on their bonds. Whereas if they issued the bottom coin note, they would have no interest whatsoever. And that is how Lincoln actually financed the American Civil War. When the American Civil War was raging, he needed money. He approached the English to get a loan, but they were going to charge him exorbitant interest rates of 27%. He decided instead to just print his own money. And because they were green, they were known as greenbackers. So this bottom note would be referred to as a greenbacker. Otherwise, the Northern Union could not have won the war at all because they would not be able to finance the war. And that would be a change in history. But both of them are fake. Just one is more fake than the other. Money must preserve its value. It is referred to as the sound money system, whereby people who save money in their 20s will be able to retain its value when they need it in their 70s. And that is why the founders insisted on gold and silver being used as the medium of exchange. Thank you very much for listening to this 11 minutes. It was a bit longer than I had thought, but it is a complicated subject, but that is the gist of it right there.